Good afternoon and welcome to the Chartered Banker Institute webcast series. I'm your host, Graham Anderson from the Institute, and today our webcast focuses on career development, presented by two highly experienced career coaches, Teresa Robertson and Colette Riley. I'll now hand you over to Teresa and Colette for a brief introduction.
First of all, thank you, Graham, for that kind introduction, and welcome everyone who is dialed in for today. We hope it's a useful session for everyone. Both Colette and I are very keen, and we are happy to share all our experience to help you. So I'd like to just tell you a little bit about myself. You probably are familiar with my name as in being the author of a sequence of career development articles which took place in the Chartered Banker magazine throughout the course of 2017, and coupled with that delivering a webcast on career development last year. I previously was the HR business partner for the Chartered Banker Institute, and I have now moved on from the Institute and I've created my own business which is all about development and coaching. My expertise lies in HR combined with talent management, training, learning development and coaching. Career coaching experience, I've worked with different organisations, a lot of basically all levels within companies, and I'm exceeding well upon 12 years just now. I was an MBA careers coach with Strathclyde Business School, working with UK and international students to help them move particularly from management into leadership positions. As I said, delighted to be here today to help answer any questions for yourself, and I'll pass over to Colette.
Hey everyone, my name's Colette Riley. So happy to be here for you. I'm really looking forward to today's session. I am a qualified careers advisor and coach. I have had my own business now for probably around 7 years, and I tend to work with ambitious people who are at a transition point, and it's all about helping them discover their strengths, their skills, and really make decisions about where they want to go in their life and their work. I also came on board the social enterprise Potentially Me, so I'm really proud of this. Potentially Me is a community interest company, and we help inspire young people, and we work with employers, and we work with families and people who work with young people. And we've got a neuroscience-based approach, doing adolescent brain training and the coaching approach to all of these people to really help them get really resourceful. So that's a little insight into me. I hope everybody really enjoys today. Just be interactive, post questions, post your comments. If we are not answering the questions in the way that you're kind of wanting, then do just post in the comments and we'll kind of redirect our conversation. So over to you, Graham.
Thanks, Colette. If you have any questions today for Teresa and Colette throughout this afternoon's live Q&A webcast, then please submit your questions either via the webcast functionality or email comms@charteredbanker.com. Both Teresa and Colette will aim to answer as many questions as possible. We've already had a number of questions already submitted, so it's looking quite good. So if we just get straight into it. I've been working for more than 20 years and my CV is now 5 pages long. I've been told that a CV should be no more than 2 pages, but I don't know what to take out. What's the best way to cut my CV down?
That is a really good question and a very, very common one. First of all, it's great that you've got 5 pages. And what I certainly recommend to people is to have like a master copy of their CV that really details everything about their life. That's obviously what CV stands for. It's curriculum vitae, it's the course of your life. So it's useful to have a document that details all the courses that you've had, all the training, your skills, your experience, hobbies, interests, just basically summing you up. But obviously you're at the point that that's taken you to 5 pages. So what's important to realise is a CV, nobody should have one set CV that you just send generically. You should really tailor your CV to each and every opportunity. So that's where having your 5-pager, this master document, comes in really, really useful. So what are you using your CV for? What's the intention? Do you have a job in mind? in which case let's look at that job, let's look at the job description, the person specification, and draw out the key aspects that that opportunity is looking for. Now look at your CV and let's highlight how you can best basically tell those people that you are the right person for the job.
I'd probably add a little bit more in the sense of I completely agree with Colette. The key thing is tailoring your CV. And if it's 5 pages at the moment, yes, I would probably say that's your master with everything documented on it. Rule of thumb, they always say 2-page CV is suffice. However, I'm a great believer that sometimes 3 pages is equally acceptable, but it's more about the content, having relevant content that is applicable for potentially what you want the CV to do or what you're applying for. So hopefully that helps.
So basically that, to summarise that, don't get caught up in the numbers. As long as it's getting across what you want to get across as concisely as you can, that's a good thing.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. Another question that just came in what circumstances is it better to use a skills-based CV?
That's an interesting question because I probably want to ask another subsequent question to find out what the purpose of the CV is for and whether skills-based CV is the best option in preference to perhaps a chronological-based CV.
Yeah.
So for me, I think a skills-based CV is useful if you're wanting to highlight what you have gained by way of experience in your career. So it's very nicely grouped together, perhaps with a few achievements to support that experience. Usually very useful if you're wanting to change career or perhaps come out of one industry into another industry sector. However, equally a skills-based CV can be used for whatever you're applying for. So I think it's perhaps maybe the best way to showcase you on paper depends on whether a skills-based CV is the right CV to use. Would you agree, Colette?
I absolutely agree. Again, back to the last question, in that your CV is a tailored document for you to highlight that you are the right person for that position. The CV can take whatever form it needs to take for you to highlight that. So if a skills-based CV is the best way that you can think of showcasing your skills, your experience, then go for that. There is no right or wrong when it comes to CVs. It's all about, does it meet the objective? Does it highlight you in the best way possible?
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Colette. In a world that is rapidly changing, how can young professionals successfully create career plans? Or will career plans simply have to be continually adjusted?
Okay, yes, for everybody, not just young people, career plans do need to be constantly adjusted. And that comes from 2 perspectives, in that from a personal perspective, your life is going to evolve, your goals are going to change. There's going to be a number of different choice points throughout your life that you may have to reevaluate, you may want to reevaluate your situation. So it's worthwhile just booking in some times to pause and reflect and recalibrate, like, are you where you want to be in your life and your work? But also, the economy, businesses do evolve at a fairly fast pace, depending on the sector that you're in. And the job opportunities that will be available in 10 years' time, perhaps even 5 years' time, don't exist right now. So let's not get too caught up on being completely set and defined about what you really want to have happen, because that kind of closes you off to being open and curious about the potential that's out there. What about you?
I would completely agree with that, and I think there's also another element perhaps to that from career planning. It's what we want out of our career plan. So as much as economy and environment may have factors, I think it's all about our own personal drivers as well. So from career planning, it can start as, as first year in a school, knowing what subject you want to choose, what you perhaps want to do at university. That's a career plan. Equally, it could be going into apprenticeship position at 16 years of age or 17 years of age. It's undertaking that. There's training, there's development, there's skills, there's lots of new things that are learned during that time. And equally, that can support someone's career plan at a young age, which can be followed through for however long they want that to be followed through.
Thanks, Teresa. And Colette, another question that just came in. How far back should you go as it relates to your work experience, as it relates to the CV?
Again, that is all about relevance, really. There is a kind of general 5-10 year rule, but again, it's about what job opportunity you're going for and not being prescriptive. It's all about you creating a CV that really highlights your skills and achievements. What about you, Teresa?
I'd agree with that as well, and I think the key thing probably to focus on in something like that is perhaps if someone has changed career once or twice, and maybe the skill set and the experience that they've gained from something 10 years plus, that perhaps is the part that needs showcased depending on what they're going for or what they're trying to achieve. So exactly like Colette says, it's all about, I suppose, the relevance, what the person wants. So if it's something 10 years plus, absolutely fine, particularly if it's maybe doing something that hasn't actually changed so much over the years. But equally, no matter what someone has done in the last 10 years, for example, there's skills, there's experience, and there's knowledge, and I'm sure the two of them would go very much hand in hand.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. Another popular question that seems to be really interesting, some people seem to be struggling with, is to answer them the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, and how much should you actually share?
That's a wonderful question, isn't it? And who actually really truly knows where they want to be in 5 years? So again, with any interview question, it's what's the objective of asking that question? So sitting in that interviewer's shoes, they're likely to be looking for your commitment to the company, your curiosity around where you fit in. Are you aware of the different departments within the business? It's really a good sense check for how much do you know about the organisation, and in terms of what's your own ambition. So it's not about you want to be CEO in 5 years' time or 10 years' time at all. It's really just tapping back into what's the purpose, what's the motive of that question being asked. And then obviously it is your personal plan, but what do you want to have happen in your life in the next 5 years? And kind of relaying that. So it's not about you revealing your innermost secrets or anything at all like that. But when you think about what you want to achieve in the next 5 years, what elements of that relate to this job opportunity? What elements of that could be useful for this business to support you in? So what opportunities do you want to pursue? What opportunities would you love this business to really open a door for you to walk through?
I'd probably put a slightly different slant, but
Okay.
It's always good to do that. I think I agree absolutely everything with what Colette has just said. There is an element of businesses want to know who the individual is and in some ways what their career aspirations and perhaps fitting into the organisation. Also from an interviewer perspective, I would add perhaps that it is sometimes a really good question to ask to see if someone actually really does want to work in the organisation.
Absolutely.
Because in the past, under my own experience of asking that question for an organisation to get a response for, well, I'd like to be working in a coffee shop in Australia, doesn't necessarily fill an employer with, okay, and this person is going to be here for a long time, because obviously if the company is going to train, develop an individual, there's time and there's money and there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. So I would always say just approach that question. Don't necessarily, if you do have that plan to have a coffee shop in Australia in 5 years' time, it's maybe perhaps retaining that, but showing that you have perhaps 3 years that you want to commit to the organisation and answering it to fulfil your own development, but equally what the company may want to get from you as well.
Thanks, Colette.
Completely.
Thanks, Teresa. Another question that just came in. When I'm asked about my weaknesses, I never know what the interviewer is actually looking for. How do you answer this question?
Oh, it's a good question, that one. And a lot of people always say to me when they're asked that question, they feel that employers are trying to trip them up. I would disagree with that. I think we all have weaknesses, and I think if we're honest with ourselves, we do have them. We may not want to tell others that we do have them. So I feel when employers ask that question, it's maybe trying to understand if someone has maybe had a situation where something hasn't worked perhaps particularly well. What have they learned from that? Has there been a weakness in it? And has the person maybe thought, okay, if I have that opportunity again, would I do it a little differently? It's also a good way maybe to find how the person would engage when they're asked that question, rather than do they say, no, I don't have any, because I think deep down we all do. And I put myself in an employer and an interviewer perspective, if someone says, no, I'm absolutely perfect and I don't have any weaknesses, I'd actually have more concern around that than someone actually saying they do have. But I think the key thing is if someone has a weakness, it's really presenting that to the interviewer, the employer. Yes, I have this, but you know what, I do know that I have it. And perhaps speaking to someone, I have a mentor, I'm getting guidance, I'm getting training, I'm getting development, because you want to show that you want to turn it into a positive situation, that it's not considered a weakness anymore. What about you, Colette?
I love that question, and I think it's such a juicy one. With the strengths approach, it's very much about acknowledging what works really well for you. But I think we've been kind of trained to think that a weakness is a bad thing, and it's not. It's when we are really self-aware, when we know where our excellence is, where our zone of genius is, that's what we really want to be highlighting to employers. So I really invite everybody, if you're not sure of what your zone of genius is, if you're not sure of what your strengths are, do discover them and look into that. It's okay to have weaknesses, as Teresa was saying. It's being aware of them. And again, from an employer's perspective, when you've got a self-aware employee, that's a wonderful thing. And it's about acknowledging that you're amazing at X, Y, and Z, but you're not so good at these other things. And the wonderful thing is, the whole thing about working in a team is that when an employer knows what you're not so good at, that empowers them to actually hire other people who do what you're not great at, and that is their strength. So it's kind of approaching an employer not from an intimidated stance, they're trying to catch you out or anything. It's actually, they've got a business to run. They've got the results that they really want to achieve, and the more information they've got to create the team that really gets them the performance that they want and they need, that's a great place. So help that employer make those decisions. Just own your weaknesses and admit to or find out the strategies that work for you to help you overcome those weaknesses.
Excellent.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Colette. We've had a number of questions in regards to networking. So how important is networking? How much time should you spend networking, attending informational interviews and applying for jobs?
Okay, for me, with networking, it really comes down to your personal objectives, really. In terms of how much time you want to allocate. So for example, if you have decided that in the next number of months or year that you want to have a career transition, or you're looking for a promotion or something, then potentially it might be worth investing more time in networking. I think the term itself, networking, can bring some people out in hives, but networking is simply having conversations and nurturing relationships. That's all it is. So when we look at it in that way, networking is really important. Nurturing relationships is really important because you never know when you're going to need that contact that can give you that piece of information. It's not always about looking for a new job or a new position. If you're working on a project and somebody else is expert in a field that will be really useful to you, that's where your networking comes in. So just actively nurture your relationships.
Absolutely agree. I think for me, people say to me, networking is the most naffest word I've ever heard in my life, and I would agree with that. I like to think of networking as open communication, that if I felt I needed to go to someone to ask a question, that I could pick up the phone or drop them an email to perhaps seek some guidance, some help. Networking is really good for your career, but it does take time, and sometimes it does take a little bit of effort, particularly if you want to get to know people that you don't know at this current moment in time. But I do think it is a very successful way for all the things that Colette has just said, for being recognised, for being noticed. Perhaps working with someone in a previous role from 5 years ago, they still remember you because you've been a top performer, you've been very good at what you do. So that's where I think networking adds huge benefit. It may take a lot of coffees, getting to know people, but always think of it from, what do you want out of it? If it is perhaps, yes, ultimately you want a new position or you're seeking promotion, development, whatever that might be, I'm a great believer sometimes it's give and take. You might be able to network with folk to perhaps open doors, connect you to other people, but sometimes about what can you do for them, and it could be very simple as making them a cup of coffee every time you see them, but I do think it is a little bit about give and take and not always about take.
Very much so. If you're interested, there's a great book and a great TED Talk by Adam Grant, and he's got a book, Givers and Takers. And it's really, really interesting because givers, the people who are really considerate of other people and are always giving information and time and all of that, they're shown to be the least successful people, but also the most successful people. And the difference between the least and the most are the ones who are at the top, the givers, have just got clear boundaries and that they're aware of how much they're wanting to give before it actually drains them. So when it comes to nurturing relationships, just like Teresa's saying, how can you be of service to somebody? How can you make their day brighter, better? How can you actually just simply acknowledge their existence, find out about them and wish them a happy birthday, as Teresa says, make them a coffee, find out what their career plans are and support them. If you hear about an opportunity or something of interest, send them an email. It's really simple things like that that will help you really nurture relationships so those people are there for you when you need them.
Okay. Graham, I think there may have been a second part to that question. Could you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, so the full question again was, how should I allocate my search time between networking, informational interviews and applying for jobs? So basically how to split up that time. What should take precedence? Should it be networking, interviews or applying for jobs, or is it a case of a mixture of all three?
I would say it's a mixture of all three, because I think when you're applying for jobs, some of them may have a closing date, some of them may advertise when the interview dates will be, so that gives you the opportunity to plan accordingly. So if you know, for example, an interview is going to be on the 4th of July, you want to try and keep that day free for as much as possible in the hope that you get an interview. Equally, that may only take an hour or so, so from the point of view, you could bolt on a networking meeting afterwards, but I do think to apply for jobs, interviews, networking, they all go hand in hand. And yes, it may feel a little bit overwhelming if it's all happening at the one time, but if you plan your time, try and coordinate, I'm going to set aside this morning to network, I'm going to perhaps do a little bit of LinkedIn, because from applying for positions, yes, we all have the day job if it's 9 to 5. That may be where your evenings come in, so you have to allocate that dedicated time to do that. But for me, I think all three go hand in hand.
For me, I completely agree. And it's back to your personal objective. So when do you want to have a new position? And it's backtracking from there. So if you think about your goal, it's about reverse engineering from there. So what is your timeline? What is your time availability? And working out a plan from there.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Colette. Another question that's just came in through today's webcast is, do you think it's a good idea to apply for jobs which are unachievable but allows you to put your name out there, or do you think it makes people think that you're unrealistic?
It's an interesting question, and I suppose there's two ways to look at that. One, what does someone perceive as being unachievable? Because it actually might be achievable, and they don't realise that. Equally, I think it's always good, I suppose, from an internal perspective, if you were to apply for a position that is perceived unachievable, it is a really good way of getting your name out there, particularly in an internal organisation, because it may give you the opportunity of getting to know the manager within that team or the manager within that department, so that if something else came up in the future, that person could become a go-to. You applied previously, let's have a conversation, I can tell you a little bit more about it. So there could be a huge positive internally. Externally, maybe a little bit more difficult and a little bit more challenging, but I do think networking could complement that. So if there was a role in an organisation that someone perceives as unachievable, it could be, well, do you know what, my network, I can be introduced to someone, it gives me a chance to find out more about the role, perhaps a little bit more about the organisation. So the question could then be asked, is that role actually achievable and not unachievable?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the perception of what is and is not achievable. And there's an interesting gender divide here, and I'm not quite sure of the statistic, so don't quote me on it, please look it up. But it's something like when you're a male and you look through a job description, if you fit around 50% of the criteria, those men assume that that's okay. I'm a rough fit, so I'm going to go for it. However, if you're a female, it tends to be that you need around the 90% of a match before you consider that it's viable for you to go for that. So it's really interesting what actually is considered to be achievable and what's not. And that's where, as Teresa's saying, networking can come in really handy. And again, networking, let's reframe that as conversations. We have conversations with people. So get in touch with the manager, get in touch with people who are in that department and have conversations. So how do you know whether that is unachievable or not?
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. Another question that just came in. How should I communicate my successes to my manager without it sounding like I am boasting, and how often should I do this?
A very good question. I suppose there's probably, I think, first of all, I would say that I suppose the relationship between the manager and the individual is a good way of sort of like, what are the ground rules, how does someone like to be motivated, and I suppose how the manager encourages recognition, I suppose, for a better word, of the things that have been done. But obviously, staff appraisals, performance appraisals within an organisation are a very good way of capturing what someone achieves within a year. A good manager, in my opinion, should know what their individuals achieve. They may not know necessarily the full detail of how it's been achieved, but they should understand and know what time, what commitment, what someone's doing, and equally what they're achieving. And I think throughout the course, if you take the one-year performance appraisal, monthly meetings are fantastic, and they don't have to be sort of sit down, let's jot down some notes. They can be quite informal. They can be touch points. They can be like what's going well, what's not going well. But I think to have continued conversations is a very good way of individuals being able to verbalise what they are doing, what they are achieving, and for managers to recognise that. But to me, it should be a two-way thing, but it's one of the ways. And I don't think it is a way of being boastful in any matter of means, because I have no doubt that managers are going to set objectives for their teams. And it could be you've got A, B, C to achieve, that's part of it, but then there could be more to it. One objective could perhaps lead into 3 actual objectives being achieved at the one time. But to have those continual, regular conversations is a really good way of understanding that, so it doesn't feel that you're boasting about yourself.
I completely agree. I think when it comes to your colleagues and your manager, it's all about keeping these conversations open and managing expectations. So what is the relationship like between you and your manager? And understanding just the ground rules, as Teresa said. What's the agreement of how you want these successes to be communicated? So if you're unsure, just ask. It's really as simple as that. Certainly what I recommend people do is create, I call it a success journal, and it's basically you get yourself a notepad. It's very much like creating your master CD, and every day, every week, it's completely up to you. Just note down what your successes are personally and professionally. It's a great way of building up your resilience, so when the sticks are down you can reread it and remember all the things you've achieved. But also it's a great way of recording everything you have achieved, so when you do have conversations with your manager, you don't have to remember them, that they're all written down. But certainly if you're in any way, shape or form doubtful about how to communicate that with your manager, just book an appointment or meet them for coffee, meet them at the water cooler and just ask.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. We continue to receive a number of questions coming through, which is great. You can still submit your questions to us through the webcast, or you can email comms@charteredbanker.com. Another question that just came in: I don't feel that my employer is supporting me in advancing my career as well as they are with other colleagues. How do I approach this with them?
Okay, for me, in what way do you think that you want to be supported? So let's get clear on your personal objectives to begin with. It's very, very easy to start believing that the grass is greener on the other side. So stay in your own lane. What's your objective? What do you want? What does support look like and feel like for you? And once you're clear on that, then in what way is your employer not offering you that in relation to other employees? So once you're clear on your own objectives and once you're clear on what the difference is, then it's time to have a conversation. But really with anybody, any conversation you want to have, it's about you. Stay, again, in your own lane. Don't make it about other people. So yeah, just book a conversation and just ask for what you want and see how that unfolds. And at that point, after you've asked for what you want, and after a number of months of that not happening, then it's okay to kind of come back to them, and you've got legitimate reason to, again, have another conversation because you've had that agreement that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. However, if you engage that conversation with, you're not doing for me what you're doing for other people, that's not a really good start to an effective conversation.
Absolutely, 100% agree with all of that. And I think picking up on, obviously, how you view how others are getting support, you personally may not know their own personal circumstances, perhaps something that's happening that you're not aware of, so it may look and feel like other members are getting additional support over and above you. So I think absolutely everything that Colette has just said there, find out what's important to you, how you want everything, what you want, what motivates you, how to have that conversation. And I think just sit down, and it's a bit to that ground rules again. This is how I would like to be developed. This is how I'd like to be supported. Sitting down with your manager, having that conversation, and perhaps together drawing up that plan of what that looks like.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. Another question that just came in. Most interviewers during a job interview usually ask what type of salary I'm currently looking for. If they're thinking of hiring you, what should I answer, and how confident should I be without sounding arrogant? And should I always give a range?
Is what I say initially to that.
Yeah.
I think it's quite, for me, I think there are multiple ways and probably that could be answered, because if you are applying for a position and it does say salary depending on experience or TBC or TBA, it is maybe about understanding a little bit more about the role. If it's internally within an organisation, there may be grades, there may be bands. Those usually are quite visible to individuals within organisations. So if you're in grade A or band A, the starting salary, the end salary is on that scale. So sometimes you can have an indication, certainly internally, of what the salary might be. So in my opinion, I think if you're asked that question, it's maybe to be within the boundaries of that. Externally can be a little bit harder. However, research can be quite valuable. There are wonderful websites like Glassdoor. So if you can put in an organisation's name, you can get a little bit of understanding perhaps about who they are, the culture, reviews on what people say on the business. Equally, there's an interview section, so it can give you some guidance on interviews. But equally, you can also find some salary information. But I think fundamentally, you do need to know your own worth and your own ability and skills as well, and they all sort of go hand in hand. I think for me, I'd probably pick a little bit of that question and ask the individual more. I appreciate we don't have that time today, but that would be my initial thoughts. What about you, Colette?
For me, completely agree, Teresa, that it's a great opportunity to do your research beforehand. From a personal perspective, it really is, Teresa touched on it, about kind of having a sense of your worth. What's your walk-away figure? What's your dream figure? So know them in advance. It's really, sometimes we can present a figure and it's actually accepted. So I'm kind of interested in the wording of the question around arrogance and what's meant by that and what your concerns are around that. But certainly just get clear in your own head, what would you actually like to be paid for this position? Because you're obviously committing a number of hours, a whole lot of skills towards the new position. So what is that worth to you? And go and do your research. But again, with life, with anything, it's all in the conversation. Often we overcomplicate things.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. Another question looking into the future of the world of work. What is your 5-year forecast for the future world of work in terms of artificial intelligence, job security, specialised jobs on the up versus multi-layered jobs or vice versa?
That is quite a specific and deep question. Would you mind repeating that again, Graham?
So what is your 5-year forecast for the future world of work in terms of artificial intelligence, job security, specialised jobs on the up versus multi-layered jobs or vice versa?
I suppose, is this relevant to the world of financial services, or is this just in general? Do you know that, Graham?
Yeah, it's related to financial services.
Personally, for me, I find that quite a challenging question to answer because obviously I think the market, the industry changes all the time. From an AI perspective, I think AI, certainly from a lot of businesses, is the way forward because armed with information, data, intelligence, helps to steer businesses, helps with their strategy, what do they need to do, what do they need to change. With regards to job security, I think years ago I would have probably said to anyone, absolutely job security, you've got jobs for life. I think that has changed perhaps because of obviously recession that we had in 2008 and so on. There's Brexit looming, so what that means for financial services, for me, I'm not quite sure at this current moment in time. So that 5-year forecast, that's why I can't put a definitive answer on that. But whoever asked that question, it's a brilliant question, and I would offer, if they want to email me, I would try and support them with an answer to that because I think that's quite specific. What's your thoughts on that, Colette?
To be honest, I would bow out of a specific answer because I'm not an expert in the financial industry. I am a careers advisor and coach, so I can help you actually navigate your own career, but ultimately, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, then you're your own expert in the financial industry. So if it's of interest to you, then do your own research. In terms of more broadly, Skills Development Scotland has got a great research paper on the future workforce. And it's all about digital skills, and it's really, really interesting. I can look out the link for that and you know, send that, give it to Graham, and you can access that. It's quite an interesting document. However, it is just across, you know, the workforce in general rather than the financial industry itself. Things are changing, and it is really important for each and every person to really take ownership of their own career. Gone are the days of your employer being your employer for life.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah.
I know that was quite a difficult question to
It was
answer.
difficult, and that's why we both, you know,
Yeah.
Colette's happy to send the document in question, which I'm familiar with. But equally, if that person wanted, I would absolutely honour a 5-minute conversation or something with them to see, even give them some pointers and directions.
Thanks, Teresa. Another question looking into the future world of work, but slightly easier this time. What do you believe are the most valuable technical and soft skills within the job market today that will likely hold their value within the next 5 years?
Technical and soft skills. What's that? Graham?
Within the financial services market.
Well, I suppose there's a little bit of specificness in there again. So like Colette, I've not worked in financial services, but I'm certainly very familiar with how things are within it. From a technical perspective, I think it's there's an element revert back to our last answer, because what I might perceive as technical skills in the world of banking may not necessarily be relevant to someone in a particular role. Obviously, IT is always changing in the world of banking. To me, that's a technical skill. You've got AI, you've got lots of other aspects within that. So I'm going to shy away ever so slightly from the technical part of it. But again, I open up that opportunity. If someone wants to ask that question, please feel free to email me. Soft skills, I think soft skills for me are things like communication, your organizational, teamwork, whatever. And for me, sometimes soft skills trump technical skills. If you're coming in to do a job and has a technical component to it, then you should ideally be bringing that technical ability with you. However, from a soft skills perspective, being able to communicate with someone, perhaps being able to time, plan, manage your day, working in a team, engaging in a team, collaborating, all of those are soft skills, and for me are actually in some cases more important because they tell me a little bit more about the individual, what they're like to engage with, and perhaps whether it aligns to a company or their own values, and how obviously then those soft skills, how I can work with that individual, what are their personal motivators, and so on. So for me, soft skills trump technical skills, because technical skills, someone's bringing it into an organisation. What's your thoughts, Colette?
I completely agree in terms of shying away from the technical skill. At the end of the day, when it comes to a technical skill, it's learnable, and that's not to say that the softer skills aren't. But when you hire somebody, you're hiring a person, and their characters and their values and their strengths and their weaknesses and all of these wonderful things. And certainly what's becoming more and more appreciated is the importance of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence really is these softer skills. It's your self-awareness, it's your social awareness, your ability to build relationships, back to that networking, your ability to make decisions, all of these kind of things. And research is out there to show that when you've got a high and balanced emotional intelligence, that's a precursor to having really good performance results. So again, I would invite you, if you're curious about developing your career and really wanting to build your team or enhance your performance, then explore emotional intelligence. The wonderful thing about emotional intelligence is that it is very developable. You can develop it, with a whole lot of really simple actions. So it might be that you, for example, you can do profile tests for your emotional intelligence. Certainly one of the ones that I do is an EQI 2.0, and it may be that it initially comes back that you're quite low. That's okay, that's a mark in time, and with a plan you can completely develop that.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Colette. Another question that came in regarding social media. I know that using social media such as LinkedIn is important, but I'm unsure how to use this to my best advantage. Can you advise or give any hints and tips?
Okay, for this, it's what's your outcome? Personal objectives. With social media, it's very, very easy to get overwhelmed and just get involved because everybody else is doing it. Don't do that thing. Decide what you want, first of all. Will using LinkedIn serve you? What do you want to get from it? And just work it back from there.
Yep, I would agree. I think sometimes people look at LinkedIn and think, I've got to have a profile, and guess what? I want to just try and get, 50 people in my network, 100 people in my network. I would say in some ways it's devise a little plan. What do you want LinkedIn for? Because it is actually quite a powerful tool. Not only can you network, you can be involved in groups, you can be involved in discussions, you can find jobs. It is actually really intuitive depending on what information you put on your profile. You can get alerts and notifications into your homepage, perhaps of we found this job in this area because of your previous search. So I think the key thing is, what do you want out of LinkedIn? Is it to find a job? And if that is the case, then very much consider what you're writing about yourself in your profile, probably similar to some of the content perhaps on your CV. But if it's a matter to network, to have contacts, build them up, have that mutual share, then there's a different component to that, and it's not just about getting contacts, like. I think look at what you want to achieve, and perhaps how you need to go about it. And one of the articles that I wrote for the Institute on LinkedIn does give some hints and tips with regards to how to approach your profile, perhaps what to put on it, tips around photos. So maybe have a look at that article. You might get some really good information from it. But again, think about what you want from it.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. In regards to that article, that will be shared with our audience after today's webcast. We still have time for a few more questions. What are the advantages of having a career mentor, and how do I go about finding one, and can they help me to progress with my career?
Okay, so there are different ways of having a career mentor. You can have a mentor who is in your workplace. So it could be somebody, your organisation may have a mentor scheme. Having a mentor, basically the difference between, let's clarify what the difference is between mentoring and, say, coaching. So mentoring kind of implies that person has got some kind of degree of expertise, that they're going to be imparting their professional experience and giving you some clues as to how you can achieve your personal and professional objectives. So from that perspective, having a mentor is really, really useful. Often mentoring and coaching are kind of put together. Coaching in its purest sense is about creating a space for you to really reflect and trust yourself, for you to clarify exactly what it is you want. Because it's very easy to get excited and caught up in conversations, and for you to actually take on board other people's goals. Whereas taking that time out to really reflect on yourself, again, develop your own self-awareness, develop your emotional intelligence, all of that can really come from a really strong coaching relationship. With mentoring, again, find somebody within your organisation. It could be that you have got an aspiration to be in a particular department, or it could be that you really admire somebody. If that's the case, reach out to them and see if they're open to that kind of relationship. That's if you don't have a formal mentor scheme. On a private level, you can always find a mentor or a coach in the private field, and that is where you would basically decide the characteristics of somebody who you're looking for, again, back to the objectives, what do you want to achieve, and then have those conversations. Google is your friend. You know, you've got Teresa and myself here, and certainly reach out to us and we'll happily have that conversation with you. But that mentoring relationship can be really, really powerful in terms of you taking that time out to reflect on what you're really wanting to create.
agree completely. I've had a mentor myself in my career many years ago, and it was one of the most memorable, first of all, and one of the most valuable experiences that I've ever had. And for me, I've been a mentor myself, similar to Colette, and I think there's that element of giving something back. For me, a mentor isn't one of those that is absolutely essential for someone's career development, but they can be a very, very good person to have. They perhaps, as Colette I think touched on, they perhaps walk through careers that you perhaps want to achieve. You admire them. They maybe have a senior management or leadership position, and they are very influential. The emotional intelligence, everything about them. So from the point of view from helping with someone's own career, they can be exceptionally advantageous. They can share hints and tips perhaps with assisting in job applications, give some pointers, perhaps a little help around interviews, and in some ways be that person that you can go to maybe share concerns, get some hints, get some tips, and how to maybe improve situations that hasn't perhaps gone so well in the past. So if you're a mentor of the Institute does have its own mentor scheme, so you may want to touch base with the Institute. If a mentor is something that you would like to avail of, the Institute may be able to help from the world of financial services, but externally there are other organisations out there who do provide mentoring as well.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa. I think we've just got time for one more question. Is it a good idea to highlight work that I do on a voluntary basis to my current employer or possibly my future employer?
I think voluntary experience is really good to have. I'm a huge fan of voluntary experience because if we are in financial services and we're perhaps doing something very different, that person is always learning. They're developing new skills, developing new knowledge, which is always brilliant, especially if someone likes to continually learn and grow. It can be very relevant for applications depending on what the application is, and it's a really good way perhaps of showcasing skills, transferable skills that's maybe been gained in two different industries. So I think for me volunteering is advantageous. How to showcase that perhaps on a CV depends where and what you're applying for. Was there a second part of that question I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Okay. Hopefully that helps. Colette, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, again, it comes back to, sorry for repeating myself, but your objective. What do you want people to see in you by you disclosing particular information? So it's tracking that back. When it comes to applying for new positions, ultimately, you're connecting with another human, and when somebody has got 10 different CVs in front of them, often it's the personal stuff, the volunteering, that can really make the difference, the hobbies, the interests. So for example, one person who I was working with, an avid fly fisher, and it so happened that the owner of the company that he was applying for was also an avid fly fisher. So that was straight away a talking position, and that was probably one of the reasons that got him in the door. So again, it's about how much of your personal life you really want to disclose and what the objective of that disclosure is.
And I'd probably just add one more thing from volunteering. You're opening up a new network.
Absolutely.
And I think that complements your networking going forward. It could be something that you do for a year, 6 months. But you know what, you've made some amazing contacts. Those contacts could be really advantageous in the future.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Colette. We've got time for one more question. What would be your top 3 tips for key success in managing my own career development?
I'd say number 1 would be plan.
Book time. Number 2 for me would be book time to reflect, review and reflect.
And I think number 3 is don't perhaps eliminate opportunities, embrace them all, and you never know what you may find or may whet your appetite. I think number one is plan. Whatever your career plan might be, it takes a bit of time to maybe, okay, what do I want to achieve? And that could be through work, through personal commitments. Plan what that looks like, set time scales, which is Colette is saying, but equally set time to achieve that plan. And I think number three for me is embrace opportunities, open up networks that perhaps that you don't have at the moment. And I think all three go very much hand in hand.
It's very easy when we think about career development to think of it in a linear way, and that you start in this position and you've got to go up the way. You might go sideways a few times, but you know your intention is on the rise. There's a career development approach called happenstance, and it's basically about you opening the doors and exploring what's behind them. So that really ties in with what Teresa is saying, and just be brave to open that door. When you're in your initial planning stage, you don't know what you don't know. So you can make a plan, but you're only making a plan based on your current awareness. So be brave, open those doors, explore what's behind them, nurture those relationships along the way. You know, create your success journal that's noting down all your learning about yourself, about your experiences, and book in that time to review and reflect.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Teresa, for answering our final question of today. We haven't had time to answer everybody's questions, but still, please feel free to send your questions to comms@charteredbanker.com, and I can share those with Teresa and Colette, who may be able to answer those questions at a later date. For members of the Chartered Banker Institute, today's webcast can be recorded as part of your ongoing CPD. Remember to log your CPD via the logbook via the members area of our website. A wide range of CPD resources, including our career management resources, are available to members via our CPD toolkit. A selection of Teresa's career development articles written exclusively for our Chartered Banker magazine will be available to our audience after today's webcast. Non-members of the Institute can find out more on membership by visiting charteredbanker.com. Today's slide pack will be available to all listeners after this afternoon's presentation, along with bios of both Teresa and Colette, and links to further career development resources. We welcome your feedback on today's webcast, and finally I'd like to thank both Teresa and Colette and our audience for your participation, and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Graham. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.